Action News, Delaware Valley's leading news program, with Gary Papa and Rob Jennings.
Good evening. Our top story tonight, a gorilla is on the rampage. Stay inside, folks. It's gonna get messy.
Due to the guerrilla attacks, we will now be doing a piece on the Harlem Renaissance.
The Harlem Renaissance was the beginning of the influence of the African Americans to the world. Their contributions included pieces of artwork, poetries, and music.
That's right, Billy. Characteristics of the era were the blues were alive and jazz was also used. In literature, African American writers supported the role of black talent in American culture and focused on the different aspects of black life in Harlem, the South, Europe, the Caribbean, and Russia. Blacks addressed issues of race, class, religion, and gender. Some writers focused entirely on black characters, while others addressed relationships among people of different races. Some writers attacked racism, while others addressed issues within black communities. A byproduct of African American writing was that black dialects were as legitimate as standard English.
The American Dream characteristics include New Eden, opportunity, and self-reliance. Anchorman Lovering will explain how it is applied to the Harlem Renaissance.
The American Dream characteristics include New Eden, opportunity, and self-reliance. African American immigrants fled poverty and persecution, moving from the South to the North by the hundreds of thousands seeking opportunity for a better life. The American Dream states that people should be able to get what they want, which is applied because the African Americans wanted not only opportunity, but to have the same equal rights as whites had. We'll be right back after these messages.
Fun times in Cleveland again. Still Cleveland. Come on down to Cleveland town, everyone. Under construction since 1868. See our river that catches on fire. It's so polluted that all our fish have AIDS. We see the sun almost 3 times a year. This guy has at least 2 DUIs. The flats look like a Scooby-Doo ghost town. Don't slow down in East Cleveland or you'll die. Our economy's based on LeBron James. Buy a house for the price of a VCR. Our main export is crippling depression. We're so retarded that we think this is art. It could be worse though, at least we're not Detroit. We're not Detroit.
Now it's time for key players. These people influenced the world greatly with their works. Louis Armstrong was the first jazz soloist that gained worldwide influence as trumpeter, entertainer, and he was also in show business. He spread the influence of jazz throughout his life to the world. Aaron Douglas was a Harlem Renaissance artist who painted murals for public buildings and produced illustrations and cover designs for many black publications, such as The Crisis and Opportunity. He thought art was not only a matter of depicting beauty, but rather of depicting life in a way that spoke to the black masses. And his high contrast, high impact images were heavily influenced by African art as well as Cubism and modernism. Zora Neale Hurston was a writer whose work was influenced by the courage and the struggle of African Americans in the rural South. She was committed to present and explore the varied richness of African American folklore and explore racial themes which influenced her writings. Works include Mules and Men and Tell My Horse.
Now I will explain the geographical and cultural hubs. During the Harlem Renaissance, black artists and writers flourished in the United States. By 1917, there were signs of increased cultural activity among black artists in the Harlem section of New York City. Harlem was the home to more blacks than any other urban area in the nation in the years after World War I. The movement was triggered after the near collapse of the southern agricultural economy and a labor shortage in the north. This made about 2 million blacks migrate to northern cities in search of work.
The characteristics unlike the literary period. African Americans during the Harlem Renaissance went through tough times, although this did not always show in their writings. Though much of Harlem suffered from poverty, they also bloomed with talent. They used this talent to describe the literary period. They celebrated black culture and viewed it as an accomplishment. They had a sense of hope that things would get better. Some other blacks wrote how much they hated the whites, instead of addressing issues such as poverty, war, or explaining black culture.
Historical events and proximate dates included: at the turn of the century, thousands of blacks migrated to the north seeking jobs. Between 1910 and 1920, nearly 1 million blacks migrated north. They left behind the KKK, sharecropping, and permanent debt. They migrated to northern cities such as Chicago, Detroit, Pittsburgh, and Minneapolis. Some 200,000 migrated to Harlem, New York. Although they lacked in wealth, they bloomed in talent. Artists, playwrights, musicians, writers, and actors flourished in Harlem. They would later call it the New Negro Movement. This era would also create jazz and the blues, some of the most spiritual music ever created. This great music would draw people to jazz clubs to listen to the greats such as Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, and Bessie Smith. On a political standpoint, Marcus Garvey spoke strongly for African Americans and urged them to move back to Africa. W.E.B. Du Bois thought differently and in 1910 created the NAACP. The organization aimed to terminate the unethical treatment of African Americans.